The Cowboys Gamble, Part 4 of 8. Back to back. Yesterday we left Dallas standing in defiance rather than triumph. How about them Cowboys was a dare thrown at a hostile world, not a victory lap. The city had tasted humiliation, and the franchise had been stripped to the studs. Troy Aikman's body had absorbed the tax of belief, and Michael Irvin's ACL had taken its toll. Jerry and Jimmy lit the fuse when they traded Herschel Walker, and everyone called them mad. Madness looks like faith when the harvest finally arrives, because the seeds of that trade sprouted into a roster that moved like a machine. The draft capital turned into men who hit like anvils and ran like rivers. The Great Wall of Dallas set its feet and said no one would pass. Emmitt Smith learned how to turn a crease into a canyon. Michael Irvin rediscovered his voice and turned it into a metronome for the whole team. Troy Aikman found a rhythm that looked like inevitability. Jimmy Johnson demanded that practice be harder than pain so Sunday could be simple. The culture became a pressure cooker that forged steel, and the league felt the temperature rise. You could see it in the way defenses began to hesitate. You could feel it in the certainty of 3rd and 4 when the ball would pound the A-gap and move the chains. Dallas walked through the season with a new posture. The jokes stopped landing when the hits started landing. The swagger that made Miami famous now wrapped itself in silver and blue. And at the end of that road, the door opened to the first mountain. The Super Bowl did not play out like a miracle. It played out like a sentence. Every drive completed an argument that had been building for years. Every tackle punctuated the thesis. Every celebration felt less like surprise than like a verdict. Dallas stood on the stage with confetti falling, and a city exhaled a decade of grief. The chant returned, but now it sounded different. How about them Cowboys no longer needed to prove anything? It had become a seal stamped in gold. And then the ego demanded the only thing the ego ever demands. Do it again. Repeat the proof. Erase the doubt twice. Back-to-back turns a claim into a creed. One trophy can be a story, 2 becomes scripture. Dallas wrote its gospel in the language of yards, hits, and time of possession. Aikman delivered spirals that carved defenses like calligraphy. Emmitt turned contact into consent and kept falling forward. Irvin raised his finger to the sky and turned hunger into ritual. The defense swarmed like a single organism with 100 legs. On the second climb, the steps were familiar. The team moved with the calm of a unit that has already seen the summit. And when the second Lombardi came home, the franchise felt inevitable. Back-to-back painted the star on the nation's forehead. America's team became America's conviction. But metaphysically, this is the hinge of the parable. The moment you crown the idol is the moment it begins to crack. The ego does not know how to rest, it only knows how to escalate. More is the only word it trusts. More yards, more records, more banners. The chant does not satisfy, it only summons. How do you top a mountain that has no top? You invent a top and then call it destiny. The White House parties became a rumor and then a headline and then a parable. Pleasure leaked from the edges of discipline. Night bled into morning, and the program that made men into champions flirted with its own shadow. Even as the team lifted trophies, you could hear the thin sound of glass under strain. Not loud at first, just a hairline crack traveling under the paint. The partnership that built the empire began to demand authorship. Who gets the credit? Who gets to be father of the dynasty? Who gets to be seen as necessary rather than lucky? Jerry Jones wanted the story to include his name in bold. Jimmy Johnson wanted the work to remain sovereign on the sideline. two kings stared at a single crown. Credit is the most expensive drug the ego knows. It burns hotter than cocaine and empties the soul faster than champagne. It takes a shared miracle and divides it into resumes. You could feel the oxygen thin around the partnership. Meetings felt tighter, jokes landed sharper, and silence stretched longer. Both men had earned their pride, and both men were trapped by it. Back-to-back had proved the thesis that the gamble could pay, and that was the very problem. Because the ego cannot let proof rest, it has to recycle it into more demands. If 2, why not 3? If the league bows once, why not make it kneel? If the city forgives you with parades, why not ask it to worship? This is how victory mutates into obligation. And obligation is where joy goes to die. Metaphysically, the double crown revealed the emptiness it was built to hide. The ache that screamed through 115 did not disappear under the confetti. It put on a ring and smiled for the camera. But it was still an ache. Troy Aikman no longer dreamed of missing shoes, but the shoes were now made of expectations. Michael Irvin no longer limped, but the burden on his chest grew heavier with each celebration. Emmitt Smith no longer needed to prove he could carry the load, but the load kept increasing because that is what the world does. The crowd loved them, and the love demanded a sequel before the credits were done. The schedule became a pilgrimage, and every stop a test of divinity. And under all of it, the same old question kept humming. Will this finally be enough? Will 2 cure what 1 could not? Will the chant become a cure rather than a drug? Spirit answers the same way every time. You were whole before the first snap and after the last whistle. Nothing added to you can complete you, and nothing taken away can diminish you. But the ego insists that wholeness must be performed. So practices got sharper and tempers got shorter. So celebrations got louder and private lives got darker. So the owner box got brighter and the sideline got colder. And the hairline crack lengthened beneath the paint. Even the trophies felt heavy on the shelf. They gleamed like moons, and moons only reflect borrowed light. Dynasties are mirrors for the part of the mind that cannot stop asking to be seen. The Cowboys had become a national mirror. The country looked in and said, "That is us, that is greatness, that is proof we exist." And the country asked for another glance the next Sunday. This is the cycle that takes empires to the cliff. The very thing that built you begins to unbuild you. The same fire that cooks your meal burns down your house. It is not a punishment, it is geometry. What rises in separation must set in separation. What is crowned in time must be uncrowned by time. Back to back was the crown. The uncrowning was already scheduled. Tomorrow we will walk into the room where the crown is split. Tomorrow we will enter Valley Ranch and listen for the gunshots that are really words. Tomorrow we will watch how a partnership that changed a league becomes a standoff at 10 paces. We will call it a football argument, but it is older than football. It is the mind fighting itself for ownership of a dream. It is the script demanding a rewrite while the cameras are still rolling. It is the moment 2 kings discover there was only ever one kingdom and it never belonged to either of them. Back to back was the summit the ego asked for. Part 5 will show what the summit always costs. Part 5 is the shootout. Part 5 is the echo that follows the cheer. Part 5 is the moment the mountain coughs up the truth it was sitting on. And the truth will say what it always says. You were never missing. The trophies could not save you, and the losses could not damn you. The chant could not complete you, and the boos could not break you. You were whole before you invented the game, and you will still be whole when you put the ball down.